Hello, everybody. This is Stephen Mulva at CII, and this is going to be one-way communication. We've got over 100 people registered for today's event, but Jenny Bien is here in the room, and she's going to be coordinating if there's any questions. So please just type them in, and then as we get toward the end, she'll read the questions aloud, and then we'll answer them. I'm also joined here by Kim Allen and Daniel Oliveira here at CII, so they'll be able to chime in if that's needed as well. Only have about 8 slides for you today, and this is really to talk through the changes that we've announced in terms of our committee structure and how we want to be organized going forward. I should point out that this follows several conversations that we've had with some of the affected committees, both at the sector level and the standing committee level, for committees that are either lost an associate director at the sector level, or standing committees that are going to be reorganized to some degree. And I would say that those talks that we had with those chairs and vice chairs were overwhelmingly positive. Understand the need to modernize the modes of delivery and exactly how we're structured here at CII, and want to talk through really several different things for today on this webinar. And we'll see if we can get through this in maybe 30 minutes or less, and leave plenty of time for any questions that you may have. And I'm sorry, it's not really two-way communication. It's just with this many people, it's necessary that we sort of do a broadcast in this fashion. So you can see the topics listed here that we'll talk through, why we wanted to do this, and what the history of these changes were, and then specifically how it's going to impact us going forward, especially at the standing committee level. You see funded studies, deployment, technology, and we'll address membership and the sector impacts as well, and then we'll wrap with the questions. So to start, I would say that this has been in the works for most of this year, definitely in earnest since March. The CII Executive Committee asked the Strategic Planning Committee to make some recommendations on the committee structure for the future. A couple things. The structure that we had had a lot of interfaces, and I think that was showing up for the sector committees, that they had in many cases about 6 different interfaces, especially once we added the technology component at the beginning of this year. It was a little overwhelming for the sectors, and it may have been, the organization that we had may have been appropriate for a company where you know, you're coming to work every day and you're working in that mode. But for a volunteer organization, it was really too many interfaces, and so some of the feedback that we got was it was becoming too difficult to figure that out, and how could we streamline that substantially? In addition, how do we modernize it? How do we prepare CII for the future, for the needs that the companies have, and positioning the industry to be successful in the future? And those are really the reasons why CII exists. And so the executive committee, as I said, asked the strategic planning to look at this. They did. They worked incredibly diligently, and they very thoughtfully went through the various impacts and how this would work. I think the main thing to think about here is that strategic planning was very intentional to separate the research and services part. So for a number of years, the services part of CII had been building and building. And when I say services, this is the CII staff creating programs that weren't really research. They were developing educational programs or developing benchmarking programs and providing this service to the members. That's difficult for a couple reasons, and I think it's worth mentioning. First of all, the university doesn't let you do work for hire. So CII is a research institute, and it's a difficult issue when you start doing what's called work for hire, where it would be a fee for a service. The university prefers that be done with third-party providers that are able to do that have the expertise or the information technology resources, whatever are needed there. But I think the other thing is after a while, it tends to be potentially organizationally distracting from CII's core mission, which again is to improve the business outcomes that the members are getting through capital projects. Now, the good news is the reorganization that we enacted in spring of 16 did provide a lot more business value, primarily through the sector program. I think that was a great big win for CII. The members get a lot of value out of that. I think it's really helped with our membership and making CII a stronger organization, and the industry overall is much better off for it. I think one of the things strategic planning was looking at is also making a clear distinction between what the role of the standing committees is, and that's the horizontal bars that you see here. And I'm assuming most of the people just looking at the attendees, most of the people are pretty familiar with the former org chart, so I didn't want to show that. What you see on the screen is the proposed reorganization, and I say proposed because it's the board of advisors per our governance that is responsible for approving any changes to the committee structure, whether we're adding committees or changing them or eliminating committees. And that will happen October 26th. So we have a virtual board meeting. It's the afternoon of October 26th. I think it's 1 to 3 p.m. Central Time. And the executive committee will largely be responsible for making the presentations at that board meeting at that time, and we'll explain through the logic of this again and also ask for a vote. In the meantime, wanted to talk through the idea of this reorganization that you see on the screen. The strategic planning committee wanted to be very intentional about what is the mission of the sector committees. They largely feel that those committees have done a great job at reviewing the knowledge base, understanding that, but it's probably nearer term, shorter term types of research and development to tailor things that are in the knowledge base to what the sectors want to do. And we see this dispersion across those 5 industry groups in terms of the things that are important to their businesses. It's very time dependent, but then also the standing committees, the horizontal lines, to say these are the groups that really look out into the future, and they determine whether it's funded studies or technology or deployment from an overarching direction. What are the things that need to be done to move the industry forward, and then at a sector level, how can those standing committees help those sectors in their adoption of technology, in their deployment of CII products, in their understanding of if it's a sector-specific type of research and development opportunity, what is the assistance that can be gained by interfacing with the Funded Studies Committee. And then even though the membership and communications function doesn't have a standing committee, and that's again also by design, it's really a staff function. It's a staff resources is for our group led by Jenny Bien to help the 5 sector committees. Now, one other, in terms of their membership and communications. Now, one other change that you see here that might not be quite as apparent is FIATech, as it came into CII, was a sector committee. And so there was actually a 6th vertical darker blue bar there. And then the Technology Awareness and Development Committee, now shown in the peach color underneath FIATech there, that was a horizontal. So the technology part, as it came in at the beginning of this year, had really two committees, one vertical, one horizontal. Strategic Planning Committee felt strongly that they do need to have a budget to work with, both the FIATech and Technology Awareness and Development, but that they should that this should be a combined technology function, and it should be a horizontal interfacing with all the various sectors. It is true that all of our sectors do have budgets. So in the case of all of our committees do have budgets. So in the case of the sector committees, individual budgets and they have autonomy to work on projects that they feel are important for their sectors, but the standing committees also do as well. And so in this case, the FIATech technology part, deployment, funded studies will all have dedicated lines of funding to work on projects that they have. And of course, at the top here, it's unchanged. The position of the board with the executive committee and then the other two leadership committees, that being strategic planning and sector leadership, those remain, and they continue to do a good job. So this is the proposed structure. Maybe the only other thing to mention here is that you see some lighter black arrows pointing into the Funded Studies Committee. It says overarching research topics. Strategic planning is very intentional about trying to get some really great overarching research topics, and they want to pull that out of all the various functions and the committees. Want to get that out of our communities for business advancement principally, but also our standing committees, our sector committees. And I think the Sector Leadership Committee going forward will work with the individual sectors to really understand what is a sector level research project and what is a project that really should be tackled more at the overarching level by the Funded Studies group. Maybe it's worth mentioning the other things in the peach color. You see underneath Funded Studies, there's a thing that says Innovation Function. It's not necessarily clearly defined yet, but we're going to take our first attempt at it as a pilot on October 1st. We're going to have an innovation workshop centered around advanced work packaging. And this will be the day before the Advanced Work Packaging Conference in Houston actually takes place on October 2nd and 3rd, so the afternoon of the 1st. And if you want to attend that, if you think you have something to offer in terms of the next generation of advanced work packaging, we'd encourage you to attend that on October 1, and you can contact Daniel Oliveira. He'll be happy to talk to you about attending that. But I think the larger case here is really that Strategic Planning Committee wants to have about 4 of these a year, rotate them around, have our next gen leaders really facilitate those innovation workshops and use them as forums to really raise innovative topics of an overarching nature that CII should tackle. Now, it's difficult to sit here in a year like 2018 and try to forecast exactly what the industry is going to need in 2020 or 2021 when these research teams are launched and complete and give their reports. But we do have to look a ways into the future and try to anticipate what the industry is going to need, and that's really the purpose of that innovation function. So, guided by the SPC, Funded Studies will manage that. Likewise, Deployment Committee, and I'll explain why we intentionally use the word deployment here in a second. It's defined as bringing resources into effective action, and that's intentional. We want to really look at what the resources are that we're bringing to bear. Do they need to be CII staff resources? Do they need to be external third-party resources, even financial resources? And then in terms of effective action, what is going to be the most effective things for the companies? This is, at the end of the day, the reason why we're making all these changes and proposing these is really to be that much more effective for the member companies. But under the Deployment Committee, you'll see it says CBAs, so they'll shepherd our communities for business advancement, the subject matter expertise that's resident in those 9 groupings, make sure that they're able to spread their knowledge across the industry sectors as well, and come up with those innovative leading edge topics. But you also see the functions of education and data. Now, Deployment Committee largely is going to replace the functions that were previously intended to be provided by performance assessment, professional development, and the implementation committees. But the reason it says data is because, again, it's not so much the service of benchmarking, but the data that are needed to aid and move our research program forward. So, and how that's done is probably going to look substantially different than the way it does today. Likewise, education. Just here at the University of Texas in engineering, there are 24 people in our executive engineering education program. They have curriculum designers, they have graphical designers, they have a number of resources that they said, look, CII, just tell us what your research is and we'll design educational programs around that, and we can do that very cost effectively for you in a way, and provide even more service to your members. So that's something that we want to explore, but this deployment committee has to really figure out how do we interface with all these potential resources so that we aid the members even better. So if I could move forward, what brought us here, and just keep that organization chart in the back of your mind as you can send some questions in to Jenny if you have them. But I really talked through a lot of this, that why did we do this? There were too many interfaces, and we wanted to separate the overarching longer-term research from the near-term activities of the sectors. Wanted to make sure that the technology function that we have with the merger with Fiatech, that becomes even stronger than it already is. It's focused also on leading edge research, but also awareness of the state-of-the-art technologies. And so this new structure was really proposed to achieve maximum effectiveness. In terms of the financially, the money that we get in from our members, we want to maximize the benefits that are available back to the members for that contribution. And more than the money is the volunteering aspect, that we really value the time that the companies that they give us through their employee volunteers. How do we maximize that effort and that contribution to provide much more benefit in excess of the cost in terms of what the member companies in the industry is getting in general. So that's the history of why we did it. And as I said, it's been in the works since March in earnest, but even there's some thoughts prior to that. Looking forward, let me just talk through, and I have a little bit, the Funded Studies Committee going to look at doing about 4 of these innovation workshops. We want the next gen leaders to help lead that, and that's something they're interested in doing. They want to get together on a regional basis, and so as I said, the first one will be in Houston, October 1. But we want to try to also balance out, the sector research and the overarching research. In the last couple of years, we've done more research out of the sectors, and as we completed projects of the overarching nature that were authorized, in many cases even 5 or 6 years ago, those are all being completed. They'll be complete by the end of the year, and that will give us a fresh start on a new set of overarching research topics. The academic community is actually really looking forward to us doing that, starting new threads of research and areas of inquiry in our overarching research program. So we're eager to get that going. We also want to tailor the knowledge base to the sectors. The sectors are doing a nice job of reviewing the knowledge base and determining what needs to be modernized or what's most needs to be fit for purpose for what they're working on. We saw some good examples of that at the annual conference this year with our PDRI and our construction readiness assessments. I think that kind of activity would probably continue. It seems to be, from a budget standpoint and an interest level, sort of where the sectors are landing. And as I said, increased coordination with the sector leadership committee on that overarching research. We also have to have a balance between what is the research team doing versus what used to be called an implementation resource. I think we're becoming pretty concerned that research team may not be the very best group to develop a product. And I say product, and it could span the range of anything from, could be 90% education, 90% technology, 90% advisory service, or it could be 50-50 of all of those. What we want to see is the deployment committee working in parallel with the funded studies. So our research teams authorized out of funded studies, guided by them, would be really focused on doing the research, figuring out what's new, what's innovative, what's exciting, and that would basically be a research team report. But the actual product that comes out of that would be guided by our deployment committee. And they would determine exactly what form that should take. They would do that concurrently with the the research team, and then determine what resources would bring that into effective action. So a bit of a change there. I also mentioned on this slide just the issue around data acquisition. In order to have great research, you generally have to have good sources of data. The thing that we've noticed in performance assessment, and of course I was right in the middle of that for 8.5 years, and over that span of time I observed this as well. The number of resources the number of people that companies have to do benchmarking in sort of this classic mode of collecting the data, going to training, putting it on a web entry form, those kinds of things. It's not really a modern mode of data collection. And at the same time, we've observed people who have construction management software, and the majority of our members now use these kinds of software like Ecosys and eBuilder and Innate, and I don't know, there's Procore, there's a number of these. Those providers are telling us, look, you know, we're getting thousands of projects in every year through the companies who use our software. They have an interest in benchmarking. We're prohibited from doing that because of Department of Justice and federal trade policies, but CII could do that, and that's exactly right. As a neutral third party headquartered at a university, we're able to do that. So I think deployment committee will work with those kinds of providers to think, what is the modern mode of collecting data and getting data for that research effort, and then also enabling the companies to understand their performance relative to others. I wouldn't say benchmarking is dead. What I would say is benchmarking has to undergo a significant overhaul. Now, our sector committees, many of them have quite a big interest in doing some benchmarking activities at a sector level. So in particular, our manufacturing life sciences group and our facilities and healthcare group both have some efforts underway to look at metrics. But metrics is only, you know, like a fourth of the equation, because actually figuring out how do you get the data in, how do you compare them, how do you use business intelligence tools increasingly to analyze them, that's got to be determined by our deployment committee, and I think they're going to be up to the challenge for doing that. And let me just skip over to deployment committee, and I already mentioned the definition here, but what are the resources? And these could be technological resources, they could be advisory service consulting type resources. How do you bring them into effective action so that the companies actually get a business outcome, an improved business condition from it? Our number one mission continues to be to deploy our research, but we think that there's a missing step here, in that there's got to be some kind of product development that has to happen, again, in parallel with the research, and then there's got to be resources to support it. The CII staff, as great as they are, there's just not enough people to, we can't take our 23 people and cover 150 companies and provide the level of service that many of the companies are needing or asking for. So How do we do this in a cost-effective way? The deployment committee will work on that. They'll work in parallel with funded studies to figure out what's the balance between getting the research done and putting that in a report versus creating a product. Working with and figuring out how to partner with people, continuing to stress the importance of knowledge-based reviews. But I think we also noticed that the implementation champion had been pushed down to pretty kind of far down in the organization. And what we've seen recently is that you really need top-level executive support for change. And that in order to move the business forward, there had to be a compelling case for change. So, and even the onboarding of new companies, can we do that at the executive level too? And I think there's a little different vision there of how to do that onboarding and that communication. So I think we'll look for the deployment committee to also interface with our sectors on membership, onboarding, new companies, those kinds of things. They can also assist the sectors with the clinics and oversight of the CBAs, as I mentioned before. One interesting thing was, and I think it was the implementation committee, when we talked to their chair and vice chair, they said they had been doing some, taking a look at modeling the organizations and determining what their capacity was for change and for driving improvement. And I think this is maybe something deployment committee will pick up. But at the end here, the deployment committee is going to wear many hats, and so diversity is needed. There's diversity of ages and genders and all those things. We definitely want to get the next gen really much more involved in CII through those innovation workshops, but also through the deployment committee and our research teams. The other thing is the effort in our industry has largely been pretty concentrated with the owners and the EPCs. So how do we also involve suppliers, technology providers to a greater extent? They're absolutely part of the solution for making this industry more effective and more efficient. And that's something that we can work on. Frankly, it's also an area of potential membership growth especially the supplier community. So we can look at that. And then if we turn towards technology, again, there's just some immense and unrealized opportunities here. But I'm not so much focused, and strategic planning wasn't so much thinking about just the software side of this. Certainly BIM and software is important, but there's a lot of technological advance in the technologies and equipment, in the approaches, even process engineering and new licensor packages and these kinds of things. We want to have a much more well-rounded approach to technology and really look at it from those different paths. When we talk to the chairs and vice chairs, they said, when we get to technology, there's so much of a reliance on our vendors, whether it's a design software provider or whether it's somebody providing plant equipment. And we need a way to analyze that, and it's so proprietary. How do we harmonize that a bit more? And of course, PIP has done a lot of that. They've learned how to bridge those worlds of proprietary and harmonized, and I think that's something that we can build on and learn from here inside of CII as well. Also, we're integrating the knowledge base from the former FIATech organization in as well, and I think that's going to be, as the sectors review that technology part of the revised CII knowledge base, that will be helpful as well. We already see that there are areas where that integration is going to pay dividends, especially in the area of AWP, so that's why it's highlighted here that AWP's got some gaps in it. We may be addressing that toward the end of this year and into next year. But one of the areas is moving from engineering and construction through startup and commissioning into operations. So even just the definitions, the technology group, the FIATech group is already studying that. How do we move from engineering work packages into startup and operations? So I think there'll be more opportunities along that path. Certainly, we know technology is really important for the future of this industry, but it's got to be integrated properly with the people and the processes necessary to make it happen. This is pretty much about the last slide is really the path forward concerning membership and communications. We know that CII and the industry is stronger as we have a more diverse membership from a sector perspective and size perspective and technology and suppliers and all that. The sectors are doing a good job of highlighting who the additional companies would be, but we've got to continue to do that some more and help with our staff support as you saw on the diagram. And we'll continue to work with other resources to help with those membership efforts and ramp up those communications efforts as well. I did want to mention, some people have asked, with the loss of some of the ADs, what's going to happen at the sector level. The current thinking on that is that we will always have a permanent staff person assigned with each sector committee that will, it's not just to kind of be an administrator and take meeting minutes, but actually to be a leader for the group, to help them organize, to work with the chairs on the agendas and those things. And so we're probably going to end up having some of our project managers serve in that capacity. These are, very, very capable people from CII staff, and there'll be that continuing presence. That will then allow our associate directors to rotate through. Most of the sectors have a monthly meeting, virtual monthly meeting, and then they probably have on the order of 3 face-to-face meetings every year, probably spring, summer with the annual conference, and then in the fall, maybe one more than that or one less than that, but just on average about 3 meetings a year face-to-face. And we're talking about having the associate directors rotate through on a monthly basis. Now, we had been, the prior idea was that an associate director would remain with a sector committee for a 2-year period and then move on to another sector. But what we've noticed is that the sectors need to have that interface with the director, associate director for funded studies of technology, of membership and communications, of deployment, and that it would be good for them to see those people every 4 or 5 months. That would also help structure their meetings. So you can see about every 5th month there would be a meeting that would be probably focused on research, and then every 5th month one that was focused on membership or something like that. But I think also just that that facilitates those modern modes of deployment that I was talking about, that makes the sector efforts really relevant in terms of what are the resources they're going to need to be successful, and to continually draw upon the knowledge that's resident in all the different associate directors, on a more continuous basis. So I think the support that the sectors will get from CII staff will be, in many ways, probably better than it's been. And not that it wasn't good, but I think this is probably a better plan moving forward. So that brings us to the end here, and probably time for questions. Before Jenny, are you getting some questions? I am. Okay, so before we start taking that, just as I mentioned before, the path forward for this is the board meeting October 26th. It's the afternoon of the 26th. We've already had tons and tons of people register for that. The registrations have been stronger than we've experienced when we had them, much stronger than when it was face-to-face. So hopefully that's a good model for us moving forward that enables a lot of our board and alternates to participate to a greater extent than they were able to in the past. But 1 to 3 p.m. on the 26th, that's Central Time, and that's where we'll look for the approvals of the board to this new structure. Assignments to new committees, it's probably affecting more the 3 committees that are being recommended to be sunset, that being performance assessment, professional development, and implementation. We think a lot of the people that are there, definitely they're very valued volunteers, tons and tons of expertise, we're going to need a well-rounded group of volunteers on our deployment committee. I think a lot of the people that are already in those 3 committees will probably find their way onto the deployment committee. But you know, we also want to see what they want to do. Maybe they have desires to serve on a research team or be more involved in a community or go into a sector. And I think this is a good opportunity for them to do that. So, and as far as communicating to members, as I said, we've had these calls with the chairs, vice chairs of the affected committees, but now we're having this call right now with the board and board alternates, and we're going to have another one of these identical on Thursday. And I think between today and Thursday, we've had probably over 150 people registered. So that's been encouraging to see. And really, I thank you for being on here today and for your attention. If we don't get to your question, Jenny's going to start here in a second. If we don't get to your question, we absolutely want to hear from you. So don't be shy about calling or sending a note to any of us, and we're more than happy to talk with you directly.
Okay, our first question is a two-part. How has the addition of CII and this proposed restructuring of the committees changed what funding will be available for research next year or the following? And do you think the sector committees will see a net reduction or a net increase?
Okay, so as far as funding's concerned, obviously, well, one of the things is that our staff salary amount has gone down quite a bit. And so that's actually freeing up quite a bit of money for program. It's on the order of about $450,000 that'll be invested in the program. I think that in looking at the 2019 budget, and we're going through that right now as well, because one of the things that happens in the board meeting is the budget approval for 2019. We are probably looking at something similar in the sectors, but probably a little bit less, maybe about 10% less there. And then we're wanting to fund overarching research a bit more than we did in the past. So in the last year or two, I'd say in the last year or two, we really didn't launch any new overarching teams, and so that's something we're definitely going to do toward the end of this year and through 2019. The goal on that funding is to essentially put about $900,000, $1 million, have them be pretty equal, the sector and the overarching. That would be about a 50-50 balance between those two groups. And as I said, the funding for the standing committees, especially the technology, that would continue. So the funding for the technologies is going to probably be about the same as it's been, and that's a bit over $200,000. Am I answering all the questions?
And then the second was, will sector committees see a net reduction or a net increase?
Well, I think the sector committees, it's probably a little bit of a reduction, but I think that's also owing to the fact that we believe that they'll, a couple things, they're going to probably be doing a bit more near-term focused research that maybe is not as ambitious or as expensive as what we've seen them working on. So they're probably not going to need quite as much money from that standpoint. We also are trying to rationalize their meeting expenses, because they were spending a bit of money on not on program, but on meetings. So that's where I say after all that's accounted for, you're probably looking at something on an order of about a 10% reduction. But that's freeing up the money, especially also with the staff salaries, to do more overarching type research.
Okay. I have another member who says, I fully support the changes. Where does the implementation of research come into play?
So that's the most important thing, is getting that research out with the members. And that's the main reason we're talking about the deployment committee. that we have to find new ways, modern ways of getting that research deployed into the everyday business practices of our member companies. I think it's also worth mentioning that a lot of the implementation resources that we had in the past were kind of additive. So you'd have your base process of executing work or project, and this was intended to be added on top. What that actually made is the base process that much more cumbersome. What we're looking at now is how do you fundamentally alter your ways of working, how your people are involved, how do you incorporate technology, change that base process to make it more efficient and more effective. It's not implementation, it's deployment, and it's deployment as defined by bringing those resources into action. So our design here is to make is really to supercharge the ability of our companies to take this leading edge research and put it into practice.
Can you please define the new position of Director of Operations? This came in while you had the new org chart coming up.
Yeah, and I should have mentioned that because it was on there. As we've streamlined our senior staff of CII, and we have fewer associate directors, one of the other things that the Strategic Planning Committee really noted was it was very important at the staff level to have somebody looking out for the future of CII, the relationships, sort of the vision part of where the organization needs to be going, and that would be my role as the director. But we have, and now we call that executive director, but to have a director of operations, and it can't be finalized until October 26th. But our intent is to have Kim Allen serve as the director of operations. And to provide the consistency we need across our staff and our committees in moving the initiatives forward. I think having somebody like Kim who can really manage the day-to-day and make sure we don't have gaps and overlaps, that everybody is aligned, knowing exactly what they're doing, being very efficient with the members' time and providing them timely information. We want the interface of our members and our volunteers to be fun and productive and and not cumbersome in terms of interfacing with CI and our committees, and that will be a goal. And Kim's done an awesome job of that throughout his time here. We've both been at CI over 11 years and work really well together. So I think that's going to be from a staff standpoint, I'm really looking forward to working with Kim. So,
thank you.
Me too.
Okay, how does this impact the LMS that was implemented by the PDCs? I'm assuming that's the Learning Management
Platform.
Yep, and yep.
Yeah, so I think the LMS is probably pretty efficient in terms of getting the content out, but I think we want to leverage not only CI content, but content that can come in from other places. I mean, just recently we've had Lean Construction Institute come up with new things about IPD and relational contracting. They've got a bunch of learning modules, and they said they'd be willing to make that available to CII. That's absolutely something that the deployment committee can look at, weigh. We just had a research team on it in integrated project delivery for industrial projects. So I think they would look at that and determine its suitability, and then we could put that on the LMS. So again, we'd also work with other providers. We have registered education providers that do a great job. And we can use our learning management platform for that as well. So, or even the groups at the university that I mentioned before. So, I think we want to use that, but the content is the key part. We want to make sure the content is right for our members and get that developed, and then deploy it probably through the LMS.
Okay. Assuming the DOA approval in October, what is the launch plan for the deployment committee?
So we're trying to organize right now a suitable date. I think it's in the early to mid part of November to get the volunteers from those 3 legacy committees together to talk through exactly the mission vision of deployment. Now, what I've talked about today is just what the strategic planning committee, how they think it should be set up, how they think it should be positioned. But ultimately, we want the most knowledgeable people about deployment in the room to determine their own future and how they think this should go together best. So I think there'd be a preliminary meeting in, as I said, before Thanksgiving in November. And we'll do that in a place that's easy for people to get to, probably Houston. And then we'll probably have more information at that point. It's a little premature to have them all get together now because the board actually hasn't approved this. So you probably shouldn't put a deployment committee together until after the board approved it.
Is there a push to deploy research beyond CII membership through other organizations, for example, CURT, AGC, ABC, etc.?
I don't know why we might not. I mean, but frankly, there's other organizations don't do research really at the same level of CII. I mean, I think that's not coming out quite right. They don't do as much of it, or it's not of the same nature. But I think what we want to do is look at working with our valued affiliates to do research together, and I think that's what we have been successful in. That we've done really great research, partnered with people at NCCER. They funded the lion's share, or really all of our recent craft development research that was at this year's annual conference. It was really a great project. But we've done projects with Charles Pankow Foundation, CURT, Impact, NIST. Yeah, we've done with other people. So I think that would probably be, we look in COA, Construction Owners of Alberta. We've done a lot of the AWP work was done jointly funded with COAA. So that's probably more the mode of what we would do. But I think if other people have got really great research, I don't know why we wouldn't have the ability to disseminate that as well.
Okay. Another member says the restructuring is a positive move. How will safety topics and research be blended in, and will it be at the sector level or at the research team level? How will CURT be used within CII going forward?
Yeah, there's probably a couple questions in there. So I think safety is absolutely core to CII's mission. It's the first thing that safety and productivity were the first 2 things that CII took on as it was founded in 1983. I think the sector program actually gives us a great opportunity to do safety at multiple levels, right? How do you work safely in upstream and mining as distinctly different from facilities and healthcare? I think there are different challenges at those different levels. So that enables those sector committees to take research that was done of an overarching nature, figure out how to customize it, deploy it. I think the community for business advancement is really critical in this regard. And some of the chairs and vice chairs told us that they were actively working with the communities to look at the research and figure out what's next and what's valuable and how to modernize it. So I think we would look for the CBAs to be, and in this case, the safety CBA to be quite involved in that. But I think we also have to authorize some overarching projects as a safety related. And I think look at it in ways that we might not have looked at it before. I've often said that the safest job site is one with nobody on it. And, so I think that's not to say we go entirely to droids and robots, but I think we take a real strong look at where are we placing people and how do we get them to work safely. And that's just one example of probably many overarching directions for safety. The CURT question, and I'll just answer it as it relates to safety. We really, this year was the first year we were working jointly together on our annual safety survey. We had more companies involved than ever before because of their participation. I think that's only going to grow. And I think that was a benefit for the entire industry to have them involved that way. I would anticipate that CURT, and in talking with them, and I actually went to their strategic planning session in August, they feel like their role is to help deploy research that's largely done at CII. So I think that's also a positive. They've organized their organization in that direction around implementation and deployment, and I think they're eager to work directly with us as we produce research to put programs together to help develop products and to get those out.
Okay. We're down to about 5 minutes left. I have one question left here. If anybody has a question, feel free to send it. This might be your last chance to get it in on the webinar. If you have a follow-up, though, that comes to you later, feel free to send it to me or Stephen directly. We'll make sure that gets addressed. The last question I have here in front of me, what about expansion to Europe and the Middle East? Any strategy or funding?
So I think, again, we're now sounding like we're going to put a lot on deployment committee, but I think globalization is one of those things that falls underneath that umbrella. And I just returned from Korea where we signed a memorandum of understanding with EDRC. That's a group of, it's largely industrial owners and Korean EPC firms. They're eager to work with us. CII's model, when Wayne Crew was here, he said this many times, which was CII is probably not in a position to have a regional office, and I do agree with that. I think we're better off working with regional affiliates, and right now we've got about 8 different affiliates that are either in some stage of maturity, either they're getting started or they're up and running fully. The group, the CII Africa group, every day it seems like they're doing more and more. It's really encouraging to see that group grow and do more, and they're tailoring CII research and front-end planning around mining projects. That'll probably appear at our annual conference in 2019. So we're able to really leverage globally expertise in these affiliates. And we've got to find a way to make that even better and more visible for our members in CII. We'll do that, but I think there's a lot of benefit there as well. So Jenny, any other questions?
I don't. That was the last one I have.
Okay, so just so we're not out of time, just let me reiterate my thanks to everybody on the phone today. Thank you for attending. And as we said, any other questions beyond this, please reach out to Jenny, to me, really anybody at CII. We're always happy to hear from you, and we'll see you down the road. Thanks.
Have a great day.
Bye.